It's episode 211 of the Author Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Hank Garner. You can find all of the archives of the show over at hankgarner.com. I'd like to thank some sponsors this week. Russell Blake, his book Jet. This long-running series starts with the very first book titled Jet. The 28-year-old Jet was once the Mossad's most lethal operative before faking her own death and burying that identity forever. But the past doesn't give up on its secrets easily. Jet, the first volume, is free right now at Amazon.com. There's a link to it in the show notes. Go grab a copy. Also, Crystal Pico Watanabe at Pico's House. Crystal is one of the very best editors out there. She's edited Hugh Howey and Samuel Peralta and a number of authors. Authors, let me tell you something. You have to put your best foot forward today. The days of just, writing something and publishing it immediately, those days are over. You need an editor on your side. So go let Crystal help you at picoshouse.com, P-I-K-K-O-S-H-O-U-S-E. Let her know that you heard about her services on Author Stories, and she'll give you a discount. Also, I'd like to thank Michael Lee Nelson. Go pick up his book, Series 2525. If you're looking for an awesome, fun science fiction read, a book that has something to say, Series 2525 is the one. In the year 2525, Series desperately searches for his parents, long held captive among the galaxy's 500 colony worlds. When he too is kidnapped, forced to duel to save a slave with powerful secret abilities, he determines to fight his way to the top of the pirate ranks. How can he justify this within his objective moral code? Will Siri's faith and his soul survive? Go pick up this really fun, epic read, Series 2525. There's a link to it in the show notes. Also, Galactic Satori Chronicles. There are two books in the series so far, Earth and Kron. I love these books so much. These remind me of old school space opera, big sweeping tales. If you're looking for a great beach read this summer, go pick up Galactic Satori Chronicles. Book 1 and 2 will keep you busy for quite a while. If you're a fan of weird fantasy like I am, you're going to love Tears of Heaven from R.A. McCandless. It's the Flames of Perdition, Book 1. He was on the show this past week. Go back and listen to it. We had so much fun talking about the things that we love and why these books work so well. A child of angels and humans, Dell is a sarcastic, fast-talking, dangerous, and unpredictable demon hunter. She and her partner take their orders directly from an angel. They obey or they'll be destroyed. It's not the job Dell wants, but it's the job she has. This book is so much fun. Go pick up Tears of Heaven, Flames of Perdition, Book 1, and look for Book 2 very soon. If you're a fan of Star Wars, like I was as a kid, you're going to love the Galaxy's Edge books by Jason Onspach and Nick Cole. Book 3 is out very soon. I've been reading the advanced reader copy. It's called Kill Team. It's absolutely stunning. Books 1 and 2 are available now. Go pre-order Book 3 of Galaxy's Edge, Kill Team. I love comic books, and I know a lot of you do too. My friend Ed Gosney runs a blog called Cool Comics in My Collection, and it's over at edgosney.com. Each week, Ed features a pack of comics, some that are in his collection now, some that he let get away, but he always tells a great story about this collection of comics that he's picked for the week, and he gives an insight into maybe what those comics are worth if you're a collector. Every week I learn something when I read Ed's blog. He always has some great insight to it. So go visit edgosney.com for Cool Comics in My Collection. And also, why don't you pick up one of Ed's audiobooks that he has out now? There's a link in the show notes. As always, stay tuned after the show for an audio clip from Richard Gleaves in the Jason Crane series. Thank you all for listening. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Jack McDevitt on the show today. Jack is the author of so many great books that if you've been reading science fiction for any amount of time, you know Jack's name. The Priscilla Hutchins series is one of my all-time favorites. And welcome to the show, Mr. McDevitt.
Well, thank you, Hank. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. I begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or a storyteller?
The earliest I can remember trying anything when I was probably about 8 or 9 years old. I started my first novel. I decided I wanted to write a novel, and I can tell you what the title was. And I think I got about 3 or 4 pages of it written. Unfortunately, they've disappeared somewhere. But the title should give you a pretty good clue as to the quality of the book. It was the Canals of Mars. And that was back at a time, by the way, when we still thought there were canals on Mars and maybe real Martians.
Oh, wow. What was the instigation for that book? Do you remember? What got you in the?
Well, I don't know. Possibly just the fact that I got hooked on astronomy because of the old Flash Gordon movie series. That was what really started me into science fiction. And that got me interested in astronomy, and I found out about Mars, and then I found out about the canals. I was reading whatever I could read that I was able to on the subject. And I expect that when I was 7, 8 years old, that was back in the 40s. I was pretty sure that during the course of my lifetime, I would find out. First of all, we would go to Mars. I thought that would happen by the 70s at the latest. We would go to Mars, and I was pretty sure I would find out whether there was life anywhere else. In fact, I was pretty sure there was life on Mars. We all assumed there was then. We all being, I guess, everybody except scientists.
Wow. Did you, was that from that point forward, did you know that you were going to be a writer, and did you pursue learning how to work the craft?
No. No, I didn't.
I love that. A lot of people give me that answer. No, I decided to go do something else and came back to it.
I don't know. I know I thought about how much I would enjoy writing science fiction, but I'm not sure that I was ever really convinced I was going to be able to do it. I wrote my first story when I was in high school, and I sent it off to fantasy and science fiction. And I got I was going to say an email back, but that's not correct. I got a letter back from Anthony Boucher saying how much he enjoyed the story, but they were full up right now and didn't have blah, blah, blah. And he rejected it. And I got the sense then that, I just, if I couldn't make it with that story, which I thought was a great story, I wasn't going to make it. Well, I was probably 14, 15 years old. But that discouraged me. And then something else happened to me that turned me off writing completely, pretty much. When I started college, I was reading, actually, it might have been a little before I started college, I was reading Charles Dickens' David Copperfield. And I remember reading that, I thought, my God, this is good. I'm never going to be able to write at this level. And it never occurred to me, I don't have to write at Charles Dickens' level. But I got so discouraged. I actually got off to an early good start. The college, LaSalle was where I went to school. And they had a freshman writing short story contest. And I wrote a science fiction story for them, and it won the contest. And they printed it in the LaSalle magazine. They had a literary magazine that they published, I think it was monthly. And they published the story in the magazine. And I thought, boy, that was really great. Yeah, and it was after that I read the Dickens book. That's right. That was what. And it was the Dickens book that discouraged me. And I never wrote another word after that for 25 years.
So you had this incredible high of getting your story published, and then Dickens just taking the wind out of your sails. He's done that to many of us,
Well, I should have realized it. I didn't have to compete with Charles Dickens.
Right. You said that you didn't write another word for 25 years. What did you do during that time?
I was in the Navy for 4 years. I was a naval officer. Spent a couple of years in the Pacific. After that, I came out of that, and I had briefly I wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I came out of the Navy. I was a taxi cab driver briefly, and finally decided to take the plunge in teaching. I became an English teacher, a high school English teacher, for 10 years at schools in Pennsylvania, a private high school in Rhode Island, and finally I was the English department chairman in well, I'm trying to remember where it was now. Anyway, it was in New Hampshire. And I loved teaching. It was really great. And I liked the kids. The kids responded pretty well. But the problem was that my father died and my wife's father died. I had both mothers came to live with us. And on a teacher's salary, that's kind of a tough game, especially when our first child was arriving. And, and I was kind of saddled with more. I couldn't support. I was the highest paid teacher in the system in New Hampshire. And we could not support our family on the money I was making. In fact, I even got attacked in one of the local newspapers about how they warned everybody. There was just a matter of time before some teacher got a salary in 5 figures. That's where we were. So I finally left the job because we couldn't manage it. So I left the job and wound up as a customs officer.
What a sad state of affairs that we're sorely lacking. Teachers that not to disparage teachers out there at all, but when I was in school, I had a couple of teachers that really lit a fire in me and changed my life. As cliche as that tends to be, but they seriously changed the path of my life. And when you have a teacher that loves the job like you clearly did, what a shame that that you have to go out and get another career because the teaching profession can't support a family. That's a shame.
Yeah, that was a reality. My first year with the Customs Service, I walked in the door, started my job. I received double the pay that I was getting as the English department chairman.
Wow, what a shame. What a shame. Well, so how long were you with the Customs agency?
Actually, I was with them for 20 years. The first 5 years, I was an inspector, and eventually I was out in North Dakota, and I got transferred ultimately to Chicago. I was the region. We had 9 regions in the United States. Customs did at that time, and I became the regional training officer. And then they changed the game again and moved all the training came out of the regions, and they moved it to Georgia, which is where we are now, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. And I came down here and became basically I did management training here. And I have to tell you, that was another great job. I've been very fortunate in choice of jobs. I've had one good job after another that I've enjoyed. I love writing. I enjoy audiences. I had a great time doing the management training classes here. So it's been a good run.
The Deep South has inspired more than one writer to pick up the pen and to tell stories. Did the storytelling bug bite you again when you moved to Georgia, or had it been working on you before that?
It didn't have anything to do with my moving to Georgia. What actually happened was that I was grousing about something. When I started here, I was training customs inspectors. That's not exciting work. Okay.
I bet.
I was grousing about that one day, and my wife Maureen said, "Look, you're always," and I guess it says more about me than I realized at the time. Said, "You're always talking about writing this stuff. Why don't you sit down and write it and stop complaining about it all the time?" So I did. I said, "Okay, I'll do a science fiction story." And I sat down. I wrote one. And it's kind of a funny story about it. We sent it to a couple of magazines. It got rejected twice. Maureen, who was my wife, called it a friend of hers, and she took a look at it and made some suggestions. I made the changes. Okay, that's when I sent it out the second time. After I made the changes, it got rejected again. But anyway, what happened was I was going to quit at that point. I don't like all the rejections. The interesting thing about the story is that it was about a guy who worked at a post office in Boston. He's in love with a young woman who works at one of the other counters. And he's afraid to make a move because he's afraid of getting rejected. And I wasn't aware at the time, and I was kind of telling a story about myself. But anyway, after it got rejected that second time, I was done. I wasn't going to bother with it anymore. And Maureen came home one day with a copy of Twilight Zone magazine and said, "Well, why don't you, send it to these people, see what they think." All right, so I did, and they bought it. And that was right about the time that we were leaving here. I was on a temporary assignment here at that time, and going back to North Dakota, Pembina. And we got back to Pembina, and there was a letter from Twilight Zone saying, "Yeah, we like your story, and we're going to buy it." Blah blah blah. And once that happened, I was riding through Mexico one time in the mid '60s, and I think it was a station in Texas. They were conducting an interview of Harlan Ellison, and I still remember. Now Harlan was talking about how he got started. And he said, and when he sold the first story, he said, I knew that I could do it, and there was going to be no stopping me. It was the same experience I had. Once I sold that first story, I could do this stuff. And my God, I'm going to do it. And I caught fire. That's I've been pretty active ever since. I think the 23rd novel will be out in the early part of March. I've got about 80 short stories. It's been a good run.
I love it. So when did you try your hand at your first novel? So the short story was a success. You got it sold. What led you to want to do longer fiction? I didn't make the attempt for several years, to be honest. I was simply doing, I was busy for one thing. The customs job was a full-time job, and more than that. So I did a short story when I could. But what happened was I should have checked out the details on this. I got a call from Terry, science fiction editor. This is I have no memory left anymore, Hank. But anyway, at that time there was a series of science fiction novels, was Ace Specials, and they were novels by people. They were first novels by people that the editor, Terry Carr, does that sound right? Terry Carr. But anyway, that he thought had a future in science fiction. So I got a call from him. He also used to do collections of best of the year anthologies. And I used to joke with Maureen when I came on there, have we heard from Terry yet? We're getting through hoping they would pick one of my stories for the best of the year. And she always said, no, he hasn't called. And then one day I came home, made the joke, and he's going to call back in an hour. I thought, he's going to buy a story. And turned out what he wanted was a contribution to the Ace Specials. Would I do a novel? And I said, well, I wasn't too sure I could do a novel, and I would be able to do it because it was a busy life. And we were living in Chicago, and I was riding trains back and forth to Center City just to get to work. And I said, well, how long do I have? He said, how long do you need? And I said, well, 2 years probably would be good. And he said, I'll give you 6 months. And I just didn't want to turn the opportunity down. I thought, well, this is a big step forward. So I took it, went with it, and it went fine. Anyway, he went with it, and it won the Philip K. Dick Special Award. So I was off and running, and it's been good ever since. I have a feeling I better find a new line of work, though. You talked about earlier that when you were younger, you loved those Flash Gordon stories. And to me, I've talked about it on the show before that I love some earlier science fiction. I love those stories, and I go back to them all the time because they more times than not had a sense of adventure and optimism And a lot of the science fiction that's coming out now is tends to be a little nihilistic and maybe I don't know, the tone is just completely different in a lot of stuff, and it's hard to find some of that really adventurous science fiction anymore. And that's what really endeared me to your work, is that you make me feel. Your books make me feel like that again. Is that something that you consciously feel, or am I just out there?
No, I would be inclined to agree, although I don't deliberately go in that direction. But I think that's the result of the way I approach science fiction, which is that a lot of the science fiction that gets written. And most of the stuff that shows up on, it seems to me anyway, movies and TV, is us against the space pirates or the evil, whatever, the bad guys. And what I've always liked is science fiction that has to do with discovery, that has to do with finding the results of, say, some of the advanced technology. What really does happen when you've got advanced? Okay, well, we're finding out now about artificial. We're starting to get cars that'll drive themselves. I saw a cartoon in the New Yorker recently in which a guy is playing chess with his toaster and losing. What are we really going to find out there, and what effect does it have on us? My first novel had to do basically with the effect it has on our society, simply hearing an intelligent message, an artificial message coming from outside, the effect that has on us socially. It's intriguing to think about.
Yeah. Do you think science fiction is still challenging us in those ways? It seems like the more we find out, it's maybe our chances of encountering other intelligent life is maybe getting slimmer. It seems that the bigger the universe gets as we discover new things. Like you said, we used to think that there was probably life on Mars, our nearest neighbor, and that's probably not true. But do you feel that optimism is still in science fiction, that we might discover new things and new beings?
I think that the optimism exists in science fiction. I don't think it exists in the world generally. I shouldn't say that it'll never happen, but I think the fact that it has taken so long, when we set up SETI, which was back in the 60s, I remember thinking, okay, it should, we'll probably hear something by February, and it never, here we are, 60 years later, and we still got nothing. And that's an interesting question. Why do we not have anything? It might be a signal that there is no other intelligent life, or very little. Or another possibility is that it might be that intelligent life can't survive advanced technology, that it always kills itself off. Now, it's a fairly dark conclusion, but it could be true. It becomes one of those things of, invent the printing press, and you got 500 years and you're gone.
You deal with the themes of archaeology and xenoarchaeology in a lot of your books. What is it about, explorers uncovering things? What is it that captures your imagination and brings out those stories in you?
Well, I've always been fascinated by aliens, the prospect of aliens, what they might be, what we could expect from them. And the problem with aliens in the movies, in literature, wherever you get aliens involved, and as soon as they show up on stage in the movies, they're not aliens anymore. They're simply guys in makeup with strange ears and things like that. It loses the alienness, the part of it that is really, to me at least, is really exciting and interesting. And I've never been able to figure out a way to bring an alien into a storyline and not lose the mysterious and the mystery about it. The mystery goes away. Okay, there it is. There. So I think I unconsciously, at least, got into the habit of seeing what's left when they're gone, and then trying to put the pieces together. And that way, the alien never really sets foot on stage, and you don't lose that mystery. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I think that's what happened.
That first book you wrote, the Hercules text, kind of set the stage for that type of storytelling for you, didn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
When did you devise these recurring characters that you have that show up over and over in your books? We've got Priscilla, Hutchins, and then Alex Benedict. When did you realize that these characters were going to have more than one story to tell?
What actually happened was that I realized after a couple of early books that if I was going to write, I tend to enjoy writing about starship operations, and if I was going to do that, if I changed the game every time I wrote a novel, if I just went from scratch with it, I had to go up a whole new set of details. What kind of names do they use for the starships? How fast do the starships travel? What's the name of the whatever the station is whether there's a sky deck up there or whatever? And it got complicated when I was doing same types of stories with having to change the rules all the time. So I finally decided that I was going to come back. I had a mystery novel I was putting together, and I thought this would be perfect for Alex Benedict, who was the character in A Talent for War, which is why he shows up in Polaris, where we've got a starship that goes out. So we've got actually 3 starships that go out to take a look at an area where there's going to be a collision between a collapsed star and a real star. And they go out and watch, and they see the system is destroyed, and the star comes apart. And then they come back home. There are 2 of them come back home, and the third one, which is the Polaris, sends a message, departure imminent, as the last night anybody hears of them. So they send a rescue mission out. They find the ship. The space suits are still on the ship, the pressure suits. The lander is still on the ship. There's no place they could have gone because of the worlds. There's no world where they could have survived on. There are no aliens anywhere in the area. So what happened to them? This is something, if I recall the way it's set up, it had happened about 20 or 30 years earlier. And something from the Polaris winds up on Alex's desk. It's a cup that says Polaris. It was something they had before they sent the ship out. But he gets curious about it and gets involved in a hunt to try to figure out what happened. And that became basically the basic setup for Alex's mysteries. They're mysteries that what I tried to do with them was to come up with a resolution that I didn't want to use things like, well, the aliens did it, or there was a time traveler in there, he got involved and changed everything. But one instead where when you get to where the resolution is, we find out, for example, what happened to people who were on that starship. The reader will say to himself, I should have seen that. How could I have missed that? Why didn't I see that coming? And as long as if I could get that, if I get a good mystery and then get a reasonable resolution, the book writes itself. And I had Chase and Alex involved, and that was really what it took. Just made it a lot easier. And also the readers get more interested, and they get attracted to the characters. I've still got people periodically who write and ask me if Chase Colpath is still available.
You talking about readers reading and thinking, oh, I should have seen that coming. You like to take these interesting plot twists and to really throw the story in a direction the reader doesn't expect. When you're planning out a novel, are you a detailed planner beforehand, or are you discovering the story as you write it?
I want to know, excuse me, if it's an Alex Benedict novel, which is those are mysteries. I need to know obviously what the mystery is, and I need to know what the solution. I need to have a reasonable solution to the issue. I'm working on one right now, Alex Benedict novel right now, where I've got a pretty good mystery. There's a space station orbiting a black hole, and they're doing some research and whatnot, and the space station simply disappears. And I know what happened with the space station. I haven't quite been able to figure out how I can set it up so that Alex Benedict figures it out. Okay, that's becoming the issue, and I'm working on that, and I'm doing that pretty much as I go along. But those are the two aspects of it. The only two aspects I really need for, at least for Alex. What's the mystery and what happened? And usually I can put the rest of it together.
What about your other books that are not mysteries? Do you approach them differently?
Yeah, I think the Priscilla things, I'm more inclined to do them as I roll through the book. I set up a problem for her and let her resolve it as best she can. And she's pretty good at it.
Yes, she is. Yes, she is. And like you said, when you have these existing characters and settings, it would seem to me that the storytelling gets a little easier in that you don't have to worry about the extraneous stuff, and you just kind of turn your characters loose and let them see what they're going to do.
That's correct. Although there are some issues. For example, I was trying to remember. Alex Benedict lives on a world that's distant from Earth, and I had Chase thinking about the moon on that world, on her home world. This is just yesterday, and I couldn't remember whether it's one moon or whether there was more than one moon. And you got to get it straight, because if you don't, you're going to have readers who are going to say, "Hey, where'd that extra moon come from?" So you do have to somehow you have to keep hold of the details. But that's part of the game. You can't have everything.
In writing science fiction, I think writing science fiction intimidates a lot of people because they maybe they're not don't feel like they're good enough at the science to write science fiction. As someone who is not a trained scientist like you're an English teacher, how do you approach writing the science? And although I know you're an armchair astronomer and stuff like that, but is there something that lay people can do to write more believable science fiction when they're kind of intimidated by it?
I screwed up the science in a story that I sold to Asimov one time, and later I was talking to Isaac. And I asked that basic question. And his answer to me was, don't go into the science. Don't go into the details anymore than you have to. What you really need to do is just have a general appreciation of what you're dealing with. Make sure you keep that. If you're in a ship that travels the way, say, a moon ship does, you can't be out around Mercury and come to Earth in 2 days. You just have to have a general knowledge. And wherever you're uncertain, don't try to look up the details online. What you do is you call a physicist and ask. And fortunately, I've had a couple of guys who have helped me enormously over the years. And I'll give you a good example. In one book, I had a characters that... trying to think how I wanted to do this. Basically, what I wanted to do was it was a Priscilla Hutchins book. They were stranded on the ground of a world that's about to have a serious problem. It's going into a gas giant. That's the reason they went there in the first place, because somebody spotted ruins on the place and they wanted to do some quick research where they lost the world. But while they're down there, there's an earthquake and the lander gets wrecked. A couple landers. And so, my original idea was, well, it's not a big deal. What I'll do is I'll have the starship is in orbit, and what I'll do is I'll figure out a way where they've got some sort of cable, and they'll try to drop the cable down, pull the cable through, and you jump on the cable and grab hold, and they'll pull you up. And no big deal. And I remember telling that to a physicist friend and watching him laugh as I described it. Said, well, you're going to kill them all. No question. So he gave me a better resolution for it, and I went with that. But what my discovery has been not to try to solve problems like that myself, because I really don't have the background. So, you ask a physicist or ask a doctor, a medical doctor, whatever the problem is. And you get solutions that are actually rational.
And only give enough details to not bring people out of the story, but let the story be the story and not the details.
That is correct.
Gotcha.
I remember, I'm not going to try to name the author because, one, I can't remember him, and two, I don't want to criticize anybody. This is not a science fiction writer. This was I remember a story where somebody was going to plant a nuclear weapon to create an issue with the United States, and the guy went into all kinds of detail about how to build a nuclear bomb in your garage. And it's just boring, I'll tell you. It went on and on and on, and that'd be nice to have the information if I'm ever going to build a bomb, but I don't think I'm interested.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes brevity is the better part of wit. Just cut it short and don't pull the reader out of the story.
Right.
That's
that's critical, and that's one of the reasons you have to not screw up the science, because you make a mistake with the science, and it reminds the reader that he's sitting at home reading instead of actually sitting out there on that cliff top with his girlfriend, listening to his girlfriend tell him that sorry, but it's over, Harry. We just aren't making it. You want the reader to live through the experience, and you can't do that if you screw it up.
Right. One thing that you like to do as a writer, from the reader's perspective, is that you're not afraid to bring things up in a book and just kind of leave things hanging and leave things to the reader's imagination sometimes. And, some authors feel like at the end of a book there needs to be resolution to every single thing, and everybody needs to be accounted for, and every decision needs to be worked out and all that. But what are your feelings about leaving some things ambiguous for the readers to figure out?
That's a difficult question. Sometimes you can get away with it, and sometimes that's kind of one of those gut instinct things. If I want to do that, and my gut tells me I can get away with it, I'll try it. But if I have this bad feeling that I'm going to have to explain this or carry it out to some resolution, I'll do it. But I don't have a rational way to attack the problem. It's all my feeling about it. Let me add one thing. It does help once in a while, because in real life, everything doesn't always get resolved. And and I want my books to seem as realistic as possible. I want my reader living through the novel, not simply sitting there reading it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the important thing about having human characters is to have them show their humanity. And that's one thing I love about your stories, is I get the sense of adventure, and I get the sense that I've really bonded with the characters, and they're not just cardboard cutouts of these perfect people that are out exploring the universe.
Well, thank you, Hank. I appreciate that.
Yeah. How have you seen the publishing industry change in the time that you've been writing and publishing? The last few years especially have been kind of tumultuous and a bit of an kind of a thinking of a lot of the way that we do a lot of things. From your perspective, how has publishing changed, and what do you think might be in the future for how we write and distribute our work?
Good question. I've gotten some criticism. There's a point in one of the Alex Benedict lives in the 11th, I think the 12th millennium, and there's they have fireplaces, and they also have bound books. And I've gotten criticism of, why would you have a fireplace living in 11,000 years from now? And my argument is that some things have simply reached a point where you cannot improve them. That for me that includes hardcover books, And that also includes fireplaces and swimming pools. You can't, maybe you could say that about baseball. I don't know. I've probably have some doubt about that. But when things reach a point where they satisfy everything you need, I think they're going to stick around. I remember especially getting some criticism one time when Alex and Chase are caught in a place that's got a library, and they're in some trouble there. But they're looking at the library, they discover a copy of I think it's the 5th volume of Winston Churchill's History of the Second World War. The other four, the whole thing is thought to be missing completely, but at least they've got one volume now from it. And I think that was what started the whole thing about they're not going to have hardcover books in that age. But I just can't imagine an era without hardcover books.
I dearly love my Kindle. I have a Kindle Paperwhite, and I read on it almost every night, laying in bed, and I discover a lot of new authors with it by browsing through the Kindle store and all of that, and I absolutely love it. But I also have a big comfortable chair that I love to sit in and crack open real books that smell like real books and have that tactile feeling of turning a page. It's just one of those things it's just a completely different experience.
Well, I'm looking at bookshelves behind you, and I think that they just make the house look a lot warmer. Even if you never read any of them, they're nice to have around.
That's right. Oh, man. Mr. McDevitt, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today. If people are not familiar with with your work and maybe want to dig into your huge back catalog and get familiar with you, where can they find you online?
JackMcDevitt.com will take them to my website, and there's a Facebook fan page, which they just go on Facebook and use my name. That'll get you to it pretty quickly. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
It's my pleasure, Hank. And by the way, my name is Jack. Okay. Next time we meet, I would like very much to take you to lunch somewhere.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Tune in for new episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
Hedwig slipped into David's den, the circular reading room. A ladder of crude rungs protruded from the wall, remnant of its days as a grain silo. He pulled himself upward, rung by rung, until the bookcases and sofas were far below. Even if he fell and died, he didn't really care anymore. No, he did care. He couldn't die yet. She had to die first. That would make their divorce final, if she wanted it so much. Darkness enveloped him. He reached the top of the ladder and stepped off onto a catwalk of black mesh, lit only by the faint light of the 4 square windows that encircled the turret. From this perch he could see the exit she would use. He felt like an assassin, like Lee Harvey Oswald in the window of the Texas schoolbook depository. But he wouldn't use a rifle. No, rifles leave evidence. Rifles can be produced in court. Rifles can miss. He pulled back a shroud of burlap and opened the cardboard box he'd stashed up here earlier that day. He reached into it and withdrew the only murder weapon, the only magic bullet a Van Brunt could ever need. The gold lantern flashed in the moonlight. He held it up to the window. 1 if by land, 2 if by sea, he thought. And then it's time for a midnight ride. But it won't be Paul Revere. No, not Paul Revere at all. He found the oyster knife at last. He lay his cupped palm sideways over the vent. Don't get blood on your Armani. And stabbed the blade into his palm. The blood came hot. He dripped it into the lantern, where the skull of the horseman waited to sip it like nectar. The reliquary glowed, and an incantation in Old Dutch appeared, shining from within the metal. It was time. Hedwig bent and whispered into the vents. Rise, headless, and ride. The letters vanished, and a cold white light burst from the thing. The skull wasn't just a skull anymore. It had gestated. Capillaries clung to it the way fine hair clings to the crown of a newborn. A thick, carotid artery moved with snake-like undulation, drinking blood from the pool at the base, pulling it upwards to circulate through scarlet vessels, through twisting coils, slurping the liquid greedily, the way little Zeph used to slurp strawberry Nesquik through a crazy straw. The blood pulsed and pushed into the nose, into the eyes, into the hollow cavity within the skull. But was it hollow still? Hedwig didn't think so. He felt a mind growing there, something with a will to challenge his own. He fixed his gaze to the twin caverns of its eye sockets, speaking slowly and deliberately. Jessica Bridge. The death's head grin broadened somehow, and a thread of black and green liquid, shiny as a horsefly's wings, trickled from the gap of a missing eye tooth. Only Jessica Bridge. Do you understand? He shook the lantern. Do you understand? The face lurched forward and struck the glass, leaving a red splash there. It wobbled and settled, smiling and nodding. Jessica Bridge, hissed the face. Yes. Hedwig raised the lantern a little. Jessica Bridge. The red face tipped backwards and the jaw cracked wide. Hedwig recoiled. Something pink and wet writhed inside that mouth. The nub of a new tongue, salivating as if it could taste the name. Jessica Bridge. Jessica Bridge. Jessica Bridge. Jessica Bridge.